Does anyone know how this actually works? Yeah. Have I turned it on? Is it on now?
Yeah.
Oh, so great. Great. Cool. Right. No. Great. Good. Great. I'm sorry, everybody, for taking a bit of time to get going. We've been looking then at this big story, and then yesterday, in the session I did, we looked at the big story in the future, and I think all that Jill and the team have been doing, helping us think about around our ethos and what it means in practice, is all the same thing. Do you see? All we've been saying this whole time together is what we believe is how we behave. We always behave in accordance with our beliefs. In the end, our prejudices creep through, our discriminations creep through, our choices creep through. What we believe determines how we behave. For those of us who would say that we're Christians, what we believe about God determines how we behave. If we believe that God is angry, if we believe that God is wrathful, if we believe that God's first response to people is judgment and anger, we will turn into judgmental, angry people. You see it in churches, don't you? I'm not talking about individuals, but you see the whole stance of particular churches becomes we're right and you're wrong. Becomes you're either one of us or you're not. Becomes those who aren't Christians, those of other faiths, those of other worldviews, they are basically under God's wrath and judgment. That's because everyone behaves according to their belief. If I believe in an angry God and I believe I'm his agent, I will act angrily and judgmentally to others. If, on the other hand, I believe that God's first stance to all humanity is, it is good, it is very good. If I believe in what I've always termed original goodness rather than original sin, I will act differently. Now, some of you never heard the term original sin, ever, I guess. Some of you know all about it. It's a doctrine, a philosophy, a way of thinking that was first developed in the 4th century by a guy called Augustine, and then dragged forward by John Calvin and various others through the 16th century and onwards. But actually, for the first 4 centuries, 3.5 centuries of the church's life, it lived without the concept of original sin. Instead, it lived with, although it didn't term it this way, the concept of original goodness. The first thing that the Bible has to say about anyone and everyone is, you are made in the image of God. Everyone we work with. When I first began Oasis years and years ago, one of the things we did in the UK is we set up this kind of drop-in centre for people who were homeless. And these guys would turn up with thick beards with lice in, you know, and 80% of the people on the streets of London, the city where I live, they have serious foot rot problems. Do you know, because they wear big boots and big socks that they never change. And we developed, you know, showers for these guys and all sorts of things. And sometimes in that centre, I did this once or twice, but the staff, they did it all the time. We had to soak people's socks off their feet because of all the scabs and all the rest of it. You had to soak the socks off and peel them off slowly and then bathe people's feet. I hope I'm not making you feel sick here, but that's what we did. And the point is this, I just tell you the truth, I became extraordinarily patronising. I used to serve people cups of tea in big mugs, and their breath used to stink. And I used to actually look down on them. I didn't mean to, but I did, and I knew I was. I was in control, I was in charge, I was the good guy, I was the big guy, and I and this team I was running, we were doing these kind things to help these poor creatures. And then somebody said to me, I was telling somebody after some time how I struggled with this, and I knew this attitude was wrong. And they said, you should do this. They said, go back in tomorrow morning and everyone you serve, look into their eyes and see the eyes of Jesus. Look at their eyes and imagine that they're the eyes of Jesus. Because when you are serving someone you imagine is Jesus, you will never patronize them. And I began doing that, and it really worked. It made a difference. And then I made this extraordinary understanding when I read the New Testament without blinkers on, or I got blinkers on all the time, but my blinkers were lifted for this bit. And in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 25, Jesus said, and when you do it to the least of these, you do it to me. And I suddenly realised that when I was serving tea to these guys, or helping soak their feet so their socks came off and we could deal with their foot rot, I discovered that when I was looking into their eyes and imagining I was seeing Jesus, I wasn't. Actually, what Jesus said was, when you do it to these, you do it to me. That was actually serving Christ, not just trying to trick myself into having a different attitude. So it strikes me that if, as we've said, if it's true what I've said, and it's for all of you guys to debate, that if it's God it looks like Jesus, if it's Yahweh it looks like Jesus. Remember, there are lots of gods and there's lots of versions of Christian gods. But what we have to do is say that Yahweh looks like Jesus, God looks like Jesus. Therefore, what we're always saying is, does this behaviour look like Jesus? God makes all people in his image. And that's why I believe this starting point of original goodness. Now, we're going to go on this morning and talk a little bit further. The big vision. The big vision is I'm sorry about the old branding. It might be a big vision, but it's about the future, but it's old branding. That's simply because the new branding, you know, kind of nice slidey thing, it's got all the tops chopped off and things like that, and you just can't get some of this stuff on it. So that's a problem we'll sort out as we go forward, I'm sure, as we get the final bits of the branding right. The other thing is, I'm not very good at PowerPoint, so I wouldn't know how to change it around anyway. I struggled for hours just to make this happen. What I'd like to do is simply begin by talking about this big vision, our story. Yesterday I talked about, or the day before, I can't remember, our story, the big story and the future. Well, the question is, where's that story going? About a year ago, perhaps it was a year and a half ago, I went into a prison for the day. It's called Uttoxeter Jail, Uttoxeter Prison. It's in the UK. And it's what they call in the UK a Category A prison. That basically means that everybody in there is a murderer or a rapist. It's a very serious offences. And there are 850 men in there, and they invited me in one night to talk to them, which was great. I used to be scared of going into prisons. I don't know how many of you go into prisons, but in years gone by, I was always dead scared of going into prisons. I used to think, I don't want to go and do this. I've subsequently learned that actually to spend a night in prison, as long as you're not locked up, is the most wonderful experience. It just is an extraordinary experience, because everybody's always so grateful to see you. I mean, they don't get many visitors, basically, and they're such wonderfully appreciative audiences, and they always want to stay, because it's either like listen to you or go back to a cell. So it kind of, you know, so all these guys showed up, 850 of them, and they had some officers stood around, you know, all the stuff, and there was a stage at the front, so I just chose to sit on the edge of the stage rather than stand on the stage and just chat, and I chatted about my life and, you know, the way I saw things, and I answered questions, you know, and they had loads and loads of questions. We had this really good kind of session, and at the end Loads of people were queuing up to see me. They wanted to ask me questions, which was very kind, though hard to tell whether they were just trying to avoid going back to the cell for a bit. But after everybody had gone, 2 officers asked me if I'd see this lad. He came forward, and they brought him forward. I said, yeah. He came forward, and he stood in front of me with these 2 officers there, and he said, I'd like to talk to you. And I asked whether the officers could go to the back of the hall, just so he could talk. He was 24, and he began to talk. 24, black, brought up on a South London estate. He told me a story. He told me how, and everybody who lives in London will know this bit, how when you're brought up in inner London, very often you end up having to be in a gang. It's not a choice. It's only the choice of which gang you join, because you have to join a gang for protection from everyone else. So everyone is in gangs. And in London we have postcodes. You know, they're like zip codes in the States. And our gangs tend to be postcode gangs. So they will patrol a postcode area. And they will never venture outside that postcode area because that's the turf of another gang. So he joined a gang. And he said to me, he said, do you know, the thing is, Steve, I didn't really want to join this gang. It's just, I had to. There was no choice for me. And he told me this story. He said, I remember some of my friends, because they lived down the road, joined the other gang. And I remember the first day that, oops, gone off, switch back on in a minute. I remember the first day, he said, when one of the guys in our gang brought a knife, and we sat in the park and we looked at this knife, and we all told him he shouldn't have a knife, but he told us that the other guys had knives, so we should all get knives. So slowly we got knives. He said, I was quite late to get a knife, but everyone had a knife, so I got a knife. And he said, and then there was this evening when we were 17 and we were wandering down the street and we'd been drinking because you drank because everybody drank. And he said, and as we wandered down the street, the other gang came towards us. And he said, and we knew them all because they were all like our friends from school, but we were in different gangs. And one of my friends got his knife out of his pocket and it glinted in the moonlight. And the other guys got their knives out their pockets. So we all got our knives out our pockets and we went at one another. And a guy came towards me and he said, he used to sit next to me in school when we were 5. But he came at me and he lunged at me with his knife. And I managed to grab his hand and twist it round. And I took my knife and I stuck it in him. And he died. And then he said this, so I am a murderer. That's who I am. And he used this phrase, he actually said this, that's my story. Then he said, I wish I'd have met you before, or someone like you. He said, because if I'd have met you before and listened to you before, I wouldn't be here. I'd be doing something else. He said, if only I could work with the kids in South London or the kids somewhere else that got into all this trouble. If only I could tell them that this is where it ends, that this isn't the way to go. If only I could tell them a different story about who they are so they don't end up like me. I am a murderer. And at that point, the guards came and they collected him to take him away. It was the end of our conversation. And as they were taking him just out of the room, I suddenly thought, and I called to him, and I called him back. And he turned and the guards turned with him, and I walked towards them. And I said, I'm ever so sorry. I said, I know you got to go. But I said, we didn't finish our conversation. And he looked at me, startled. And I said, you know, you need my name and address and phone number and email address. And he said, why? And I said, well, because you've just passed the interview. And he said, well, I'm not sure he said anything because it was, and the prison officers looked at me as though I was from a different planet. And he stood there and I said, you know, the interview, you've just passed it. And he said, what interview? I said, you know, the interview that I just had with you. You just came to me for an interview for a job. You just came to me for an interview as a youth worker with Oasis, a community youth worker. And I just wanted to say before you go that you've passed and you've got the job. So here are my contact details. All you've got to do is ring me or write to me as soon as you're out of prison. You are an Oasis worker in waiting. What I was aiming to do with that was change his story. You see, some people get stuck in a story. If you're a U2 fan, Bono has a song all about Kurt Cobain, and it's called Stuck in a Moment. And it talks about how Kurt Cobain got stuck in this moment, and he couldn't get out of it. Stuck in a moment and you can't get out of it. And because he couldn't get out of it, his life collapsed and it came to an end. You can't get stuck in a moment. The problem with so many people's story, the kind of people that we work with, is their story is stuck. It is, I live in a slum and I'm illiterate. It is, I've got HIV and it's a death sentence. It is, no one from my family has ever learnt to read. It is, no one from my family has ever been to university. It is, I'm the kid no one likes. It is, I'm a failure. That's a story. And the problem with that story, with that plausibility structure, is it's going nowhere. I'm a murderer. But when I say to this guy, and here is my name, because you've passed the interview, and you are an Oasis youth worker, what I do is I project his story into the future. Do you see? Instead of it being a full stop, it's now a pause or the end of a paragraph, and there's a new paragraph waiting to happen. And that's really what we're about, isn't it, all the time? We're about giving people a different story or another chapter. We're about telling them that their story doesn't stop here, that it's got a future. Remember the story I told you about when Connie and I went to Prague and we saw the names of those Jews who'd been killed by the Hitler machine in the war? And I asked the question, why did they keep on having children? And the answer is because they believed in a story that didn't end in Auschwitz. They believed in a story that had future to it. Now, Jill talked about this yesterday, and she talked about telos. Do you know that word telos? I think she mentioned it this morning as well. And she said the telos of anything is the end. It's a word that occurs in the Bible, actually. It means the end. We use it all the time because we talk about a telephone, we talk about a television, we talk about the telegraph, we talk about a telescope. And they all use that same word because it means seeing the end. So a telescope is an instrument to see the far distance. A telegraph is the same thing, to hear the far distance. A telephone, to listen to someone in the distance. A television, to see something that's miles away on the other side of the world. A telos is where your story's headed. It's the projection of that story. Does that make sense to you? And the projection of our big story is this. We've been talking about it all week long, and we prayed this prayer when we stood round the fire last night, after my team had, of course, won the dance competition, which, you know, I know you're all bitter about, but, you know, there are winners and losers. You know, it's just your story. But after all that, you know, what happened was we gathered round the fire, and we prayed the Lord's Prayer, the disciples' prayer, actually, the apprentice prayer. And we prayed, Our Father, who is in heaven, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth. That means when you pray, and a prayer, by the way, is never a thing you say. It can be a thing you say, and we do say prayers, but Jesus didn't say the Lord's Prayer. He said, when you pray, pray, Our Father, who is in heaven, hallowed be your name, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth. When you pray, pray this. A real prayer isn't something you say. once a day or once a week or once a month or on Sundays, although we do pray liturgies on Sundays and that, and or you know, in our morning devotions, or if that's your pattern, you know, that's a wonderful thing. But a real prayer isn't something you say, it's something you live. It's something that's inside you. It's something that gets into your knees and into your feet and into your, out of your head and into your hands, and it gets into your arms. It motivates you. It keeps you up late at night. It wakes you up in the middle of the night scribbling stuff down. It gets you up early in the morning. It keeps you awake. You're on holiday. You're sat in a leisurely place, but your mind's twirling because you're thinking about your prayer. That's a prayer. It's a yearning. It's an aching. It's a life invested. That is a prayer. That's a prayer, which is why, by the way, Paul says pray at all times. I mean, otherwise it'd be a stupid thing. Spend your whole life saying prayers. Well, when do I do anything else? Do you see? He didn't mean spend your whole life doing liturgies. He meant invest your life in this wonderful big story so that it becomes an aching and a yearning and a longing. So, our prayer is your kingdom come, your will be done on earth, which means your kingdom come, your will be done in Zimbabwe. It means your kingdom come, your will be done in Kampala. It means your kingdom come, your will be done in Waterloo, where I live. Your kingdom come, your will be done in my town, in my community, in my school. That's what I'm living for. Does that make sense? So, we have a big story, but this big story's got to tell us because it's going somewhere and it's about God's kingdom coming. And as I've said several times, Jesus tells us to pray God's kingdom come because it's clear that God's kingdom isn't here in its fullness. As we look around the world and we see so much suffering, some of us kind of met and talked about this a little bit last night. There's an interesting thing. When God creates the world, Genesis chapter 1, the story of Genesis, it's a story, it's a piece of poetry. Actually, Genesis chapter 1, check it out, you know, read the books. It's a piece of poetry. It's not a piece of scientific data, a misunderstanding often made. But it's a piece of poetry. If you look at it and then you look at how the Psalms are set out, you'll see, oh, it's set out like a psalm. That's because it's a piece of poetry. It's a piece of poetry, and it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And then it goes on, it says, it was good. And then God slowly creates. And as he creates, he says, it's good, it's good, it's good, it's good. It gets repeated. And then he creates humanity, male and female. He created them in his own image. And he says, it is very good. Just by the way, I ought not to take too long. What time are we going to finish, Graham? It's 15:15, isn't it? Yeah? Okay. Whew, I better go fast then. Thank you very much, Graham. I better tell you this, now I started on it though. The thing about Genesis 1 and the image of God is an extraordinary thing. If you read other creation stories, because there are many other creation stories, some that probably predate Genesis chapter 1, but they all say the same thing. They say it in different languages and different ways, but they all say the same thing. They say this: the king is created in the image of God. Sometimes they say men are created in the image of God, but none of them say women are created in the image of God. And Genesis chapter 1 rewrites this whole thing. Normally the creation stories talk about gods who are angry and hate humanity, even from the outset. They talk about the fact that humanity is created as an accident. But Genesis chapter 1 begins, in the beginning was God. And he created, and it was good. It wasn't an accident. And then it comes to this wonderful verse, verse 27, and God created humanity, male, and here it comes, and female in his own image. This is the democratization of the image of God, and you're not even off the first page of the Bible yet. It's an extraordinary thing. It is an extraordinary thing. And I'll tell you what, half the world has never got to terms with the 27th verse of the first book of the whole Bible. Every man and every woman is created in the image of God. Not just the king and not just the men. Half the church has never got to terms with that. Most golf clubs have never got to terms with that. Every man and every woman created in the image of God. Original goodness. That's what it says. But then it goes on into chapter 2 and it says, the story continues. It's a piece of poetry. It's a parable, if you like. And we're to read great truths from it. And here is this great truth. It simply says, And there was in this garden, this paradise, a snake. And the snake tempted Adam and Eve, and they caved in. And some Christians make some big mistakes about this, because we say they caved in and did what the snake said, and therefore evil entered the world. You've heard that. They fell and evil entered the world, yeah? Yeah. Well, they did fall and deviate from God's pattern and plan, and that has caused great havoc. Humanity deviating from God's pattern and plan. Here's the fact, though. The snake was already in the garden. The snake symbolises temptation and evil. In Genesis, constantly we're told the world is good. God looked at it and saw it was good. It never says it was perfect. Not once. And the snake already existed. In other words, in creation, from the very beginning, theologians would all tell you, what Genesis 1 and 2 are telling us as, there was something wrong at the heart of things. Even though they were good, there was something broken. There was the presence of menace even before the fall of humanity. Does that make sense to you? It was there. That's what the Bible has to say. It's not often what's been taught, because we've got to take our blinkers off and have another look at this. There was this things were not perfect. And that's why we find ourselves in the world we find ourselves in. Things have never been perfect. Good, but not perfect. All sorts of stuff wrong. And so in the New Testament, Paul says the whole of creation is waiting for its liberation. Some of you would know that verse and some wouldn't. But there's this yearning that what God's going to do is renew the whole cosmos, not just humanity, because the whole cosmos is somehow broken and warped. Still bears the image of God, but there's something wrong right at the heart of everything. And so that's why we're plunged into this battle. That's why we're plunged into this battle. Some of us talked about last night, is God in control or not in control? And the truth is, of course, that there's lots of stuff that happens in our world that God's not in control of. Did God cause the tsunami? If he did cause the tsunami, then why did we spend so much time praying to him afterwards for all the victims and asking for his help for them, when actually he caused it in the first place? It would have been an illogical prayer, wouldn't it? We live in a world that before the fall was warped. The snake, the presence of evil, was already in the garden. And so our battle is to bring in the kingdom of God. Jesus says, and when you pray, bring the kingdom of God. Pray, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Now, I'm going to go on. I'm going to miss out a load of stuff I was going to talk about. And, oops. Okay, we get this back. I'm going to talk just very briefly about, I'm going to illustrate this and then I'm going to ask you to do something. So get ready to do something. I'm going to look at, if this works, I'm going to look at what I work in one of our hubs in the UK. So one of the communities, you're all working in an Oasis community. I happen to work in one of the communities in the UK, which is called the Waterloo Hub. It's in central London. There's lots of poverty there. I was just explaining a little bit about it. And it's called the Waterloo Hub. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Waterloo Hub, not for the sake of telling you about the Waterloo Hub, but simply so you can think about your community. You know, the UK talks about hubs all the time. This is actually a picture of our hub. It's hard to see there. We're there. I'll show you where we are. There and there. Right. We own 2 buildings, and they're there, and that's where we're based. And that's a 500-metre ring around it, as you can see. This is the River Thames. Ta-da! And that's where Big Ben is, and all of that kind of stuff. But all these yellow bits, they're housing estates, and they're very poor housing estates. There's 8 of them, very poor housing estates, and there's been lots of poverty there for a long, long time. There's high crime levels, there's antisocial behaviour, there's poor local services. Whoops, I've got to go back, right? There's poor local services, there's economic poverty, there's poor health, poor fitness, poor education, poor housing, high unemployment, high rates of teenage pregnancy, some of the highest in Europe, and fragmented family life. That's all in that 500-metre ring around us. And so, because we want to bring God's kingdom, you see, our story's got to tell us we're going somewhere. The Christ-centred story isn't stuck. You know, like I said the other day, sometimes the gospel, the good news of what Jesus does in someone's life, has been misrepresented as he comes to forgive you. It's misrepresented that way, not because he doesn't come to forgive us, but it's so much more than that. You know, as I was saying to some people yesterday, I think, I've been a Christian 40 years. I became, more than that, I became a Christian when I was 14, do you know? And so, when I was 14, I experienced this thing that the God of all creation was interested in me and wanted to forgive me. That's wonderful. But 40 years has come and gone since then. So I can say, it's wonderful. When I was 14, God forgave me. And when I'm 26, I'm saying, it's wonderful. When I was 14, God forgave me. And when I'm 36, it was brilliant back then, 2.5 decades ago. God forgave me. And when you go on and go, it's wonderful then. God forgave me. That's stagnant. But the telos we have is going somewhere, because God calls us not just to forgiveness, but to partnership. To partner with him, to engage with him in what he's doing in bringing in his kingdom. Breaking it in. There's a great poem that was written by an English poet, and in England we used to have, until about 70 years ago, 60 years ago probably, in many streets, gas lamp lights. Now we got these electric things, do you know? But we used to have gas lamp lights, and that meant that every dusk a lamplighter used to come down the street, and he used to pull on there. He used to have a long, I can't remember this, but I've seen pictures of it. He used to have a long stick with a hook on the end, and he used to hook a chain, and he used to pull down on the chain, and the lamp used to burst into light. In fact, we still got them in the UK some places. They've kept them purposely. And he paints this picture, does this poet, of the lamplighter coming down the street at dusk, and it's all dark, and he reaches up with his hook and he pulls on one lamp and it bursts into light, and he punches, this is the phrase he uses, he punches a hole in the darkness. Then he crosses the street, walks up the street, and he pulls down on the next light and he punches another hole in the darkness as that lamp comes to life. And then he walks up, and then another and another and another, and he goes up the street punching holes in the darkness until the darkness is completely gone. That's what bringing the kingdom of God is. That's what it's about. That's what Jesus' prayer for us is, that we long for the coming in of God's kingdom. Your kingdom come, your will be done. In other words, we are punching holes in the darkness. We're punching holes in the darkness in Kampala. We're punching holes in the darkness in Dhaka. We're punching holes in the darkness in Mumbai and Bangalore and Chennai. We're punching holes in the darkness in Manchester and Salford and on the Ordsall estate. We're punching holes in the darkness wherever we work. Punching, bringing in God's kingdom, which will, in the end of time, come in its completeness. That's what we're about. You don't look very excited about that, but it seems to me that that's the greatest thing in all the world, you know? Don't you look around you and see so many talented people doing nothing? Do you know, they're talented but bored. They've got no direction. Without direction, you're lost. Without a story, a big plausibility structure with a telos, you are going nowhere in life. That's the truth. You're stuck. You're marooned. But with a telos, you've got direction. And if your telos is to get through university, that's great. If your telos is to get a degree, that's great. But it's still nothing. We've got to be careful, by the way. We've got to be careful. I say this about the UK as well. You see, we work with kids. You know, we work with kids who have no sense of the future. You talk to loads of kids in the UK, you know, around Waterloo and our hub, and you talk to them and you say, what do you want to be? Don't know. What do you want to be? I want to be a pop star, a van driver, you know, or whatever it is. And we say, no, the world's full of great things. You could become an architect or a lawyer or an engineer. You could become a singer. You could become a dancer. You could become a politician. You could become a sociologist. You could study. You could go somewhere. You could be, you know, do you see what I mean? And actually, we're selling them short if we tell them that. How many 40-something engineers, architects, lawyers, teachers do you know that are all washed up because they haven't got a clue where they're going? How many? How many politicians do I sit down with at the age, you know, because I live close to them, you know, we live down the road, they come see me. I don't know if I should be in politics anymore, I'd perhaps like to try something else. How many highly paid PhDs do you know with absolutely no sense of direction? So let's not fall for this. It's from a different plausibility structure. It's from a different worldview that says success is having a PhD or success is being a professional. Success is being a whole person and knowing why you're here. That's what success is. You know, becoming a lawyer or a doctor or an architect or whatever it is helps considerably, and that's why we strive to give people ambition. An aspiration, but we see beyond that because we know that we might deal well with them at 15 otherwise, but they'd be washed up at 45 and wondering where they're going, and families end up splitting up. How many men leave home and have an affair because actually it's not that they're bored with their wife, it's that they're bored with themselves? Isn't that true? So let's not sell someone that doesn't come from our plausibility structure, our big story. Let's tell them we're called into partnership. Anyway, what we're trying to do in Waterloo is this. We wrote it down and we decided these are the things we want to do. We want to build a stronger sense of community across the southern end of Lambeth's Bishop's Ward. By the way, the 500-metre circle I showed you is the southern end of Lambeth's Bishop's Ward. It's just what it's called. You know, it's a bit boring, but that's what it's called. But what we want to do there is we want to transform it into an environment where people, including families, feel safe and happy and proud to live and to learn and to work alongside one another. Because at the moment they don't. Remember? High unemployment, bad housing, bad education, bad health care, streets with lots of crime, everything falling apart. We want to transform this whole community and make it safe for families to live there. We want to stimulate a local culture of enterprise and self-help. We want to raise aspirations as well as education and employment opportunities. We want to reduce crime and antisocial behaviour. We want to develop South Waterloo, another name for the south end of Lambeth's Bishop's Ward. And we want to develop South Waterloo into a world-class tourist destination by more effectively extending London's South Bank into to the Imperial War Museum. That will make no sense to anyone who doesn't live there. All right? Don't worry about it. It's all small talk. Do you know? But that's what we want to do because that's possible in that area. And why do we want to do that? Because we want to create jobs. We want to create jobs so that people can thrive instead of struggle through life. That's what we aim to do. And we want to encourage an environment where the private and public sectors work together in deeper partnerships. And we want to facilitate new networks, deepen partnerships between community leaders, between residents, local employers, schools, public sector bodies, the police, social services, and other voluntary agencies and places of worship. And we want to ensure outstanding joined-up community services for local residents. And lastly, we want to create opportunities for local people to get involved in shaping all this and buying into delivering the change itself. And we've thought all that through and we've put together a 10-year plan to achieve that. And in actual fact, this morning on my phone, my friend's Matt Hurst, he's a guy in the church that's part of this hub. He just emailed me with all our communication strategy because we're going to start in the next couple of months talking to all the shopkeepers and inviting them in and we worked out how we're going to do this because we want to do things with people, not to them or even for them, which is a theme that's come up out of this. If you do things to people, you patronise them. If you do things for them, well, actually, you leave them de-skilled. But if you do things with them, you skill them and drive them forward. And that, it strikes me, is an incarnational principle. That's another way of saying incarnation. But we come to do these things. And what we're concerned about is this, what we call 360 life. Social, spiritual, physical, well, all the stuff that we've been talking about and we've all talked about this thing. But that's how we see it locally. Now, the reason for me telling you that about this hub is simply saying, oh, that's what they're doing there, do you see? Now, that works out in all sorts of ways. We're just trying to take on board the local school. We're just trying to take on board the local community centre, which is run down and no one uses it. We're talking about whether we can manage the local park and the local play space. only because it doesn't get used at the moment. It's not because we've got this hungry desire to take over everything. We've got a hungry desire to make sure everything works, and where it's not working, we'd like to do it. But all of that arises out of this, and it's all simple ways we've got contextually of doing what we're supposed to do. And what you should be doing is thinking about, how do you announce that every man and woman is made in the image of God? We are originally good to the people where you are, if that makes sense. So, it's just gone past 12 and Graham's probably getting panicky, so I am going to finish in a minute, and I'm going to finish by giving you something to do. First of all, I'd like us to just look at this again. This is Revelation 21, and it's verses 1 to 5, and it's the verses that Andy read to us on the second day, and we've talked about a little bit. Now, if we got to tell us, if our story's going somewhere, where's it going? This is where it's going, says says Revelation 21. This is where our story is headed to, right? We're punching holes in the darkness. We're building the kingdom of God. We're partnering with God. We're not just forgiven. We're in partnership. We've got the best telos in the world. It's taking us somewhere, and this is where it's taking us. John, in Revelation, has this vision, and this is what he says about it. I'll read these words to you. Then we're going to do something with it. Well, not here, homework, if you see what I mean, to take away. Right. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, now the dwelling of God is with men, and he will live with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them and will be their God. Then, I'm reading it, I'll turn it on. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, no more mourning, no more crying, no more pain, for the old order of stuff is completely passed away. It's gone. He who was seated on the throne said, I am making everything new. I'm not just punching holes in the darkness, I'm bringing daylight. Everything is getting renewed, made new. Then he said, write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. That's our telos. That's where our story's going. The kingdom of God is coming in fullness. It says there, if I can flick back, I don't know if I can. It says there that I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, poetic language again, coming down out of heaven from God. God is coming to earth to renew the earth. Now, one extraordinary thing you may or may not know, there are two Greek words in the Bible for new. They are those there. And one of them, neos, means brand new, and the other one means renewed. One means brand new. I got a brand new car, a brand new dress, a brand new pair of trousers, a brand new house. It means brand new. The other one means renewed. It means recycled, refurbished. The only word that the Bible ever uses in talking about the new heavens and the new earth is the recycled one. When it says, I saw a new heaven and a new earth, Genesis starts with, and God created the heavens and the earth. Heavens basically meant the sky in that context, the earth and the skies. He created the earth and the skies. And Revelation ends by saying, and God recreated the heavens, the skies and the earth. I am making all things new. There it is. He said, write this down. I am making everything renewed. So that's what God's doing. He's working here to make everything new. He's punching holes in the darkness, and we're in partnership with him. Everything you do in your hub, in your community, everything you do through your project in your country, everything you do inside Oasis and outside Oasis, if we are change agents, agents of the kingdom of God, what we're about is punching holes in the darkness, bringing in this kingdom, this fantastic telos. And it all goes, we're making all things new. So, if that's true, what we did in the Waterloo hub is we sat down and we said, if that's true, that we are called to bring God's kingdom here in Waterloo and make everything new, let's rewrite Revelation 21, those verses, for Waterloo. What would the lights going on in Waterloo be like? If we could punch enough holes in the darkness that we created brand new daylight, what would it look like in Waterloo? When God's kingdom comes in its fullness, which of course won't be through just through what we do, but when God's kingdom comes in its fullness at the end of the time and all things are made new, the whole earth is made new, and even Waterloo is made new, what will it look like? And so we rewrote Revelation 21 for that purpose. And I'd like to read it to you, and then I'd like to finish. And as I read it to you, I'd like you to think, first of all, this. You need to know some things. Where the Waterloo hub is by the River Thames. The River Thames is a filthy river. No one swims it ever. It's not very wide, but no one swims across it. One mouthful of that, your history, you know. Next thing you need to know, there's a park down the road from us called Kennington Park. It's where the gangs hang out and deal drugs. Lots of kids get killed through knife fights in our area. Everything's worn down. The swings are rusty. Kids are scared of teenagers. Old people are scared of teenagers, and teenagers are scared of teenagers. You ought to know there's a place down the road from us called the Elephant and Castle, and the pollution is really thick. It's bad for your asthma and bad for everything. And you ought to know there's a metro station across the road from us called Lambeth North Tube Station. So this is how we rewrote Revelation 21. It was 8 o'clock on Monday morning. I was standing by Lambeth North Station. I saw a new London, a renewed London, coming down from the heavens. I saw a teenager leaping out of bed with joy, laughing at the freshness of the morning. I saw elderly ladies skipping down Kennington Road. I saw children paddling in the River Thames. I saw a football match in Kennington Park, and the teams were mixed people from every people group. Asylum seekers and taxi drivers, policemen and prisoners, pensioners and politicians. People from every race and class playing and laughing in the sun. I saw a street party where the people were eating and dancing because there was hope again. And I looked across the community of South London, a community of hope, a community of grace, a community of warmth. And in the clearness of the morning, I looked down into the Elephant and Castle, and there was no more asthma. No more unwanted pregnancies, no more debt, no more violence, no more overcrowding, and no one was too busy. The River Thames was flowing with crystal clear water. There were no more needles, no more condoms in the park. No more sorrow of family breakdown, no more poverty, no more need, no more unemployment, no or mind-numbing jobs, no more hopelessness. No more sadness and tears, only joy and laughter. No more discrimination, no more drunken clubbing, no threats, no fears. The dividing walls were gone. Families and neighbours were restored. There was no more rubbish, no dealers, no guns, no knives, no dangerous dogs. There were no racial tensions, just one harmonious mix in Technicolor. And I looked and I saw kids playing football in the streets and neighbours cheering them on. I saw homes without locks on the door where there was always a welcome guaranteed. I saw a playground where the climbing frames weren't rusty, where children threw themselves into the air without fear of harm, and where the teenagers helped the little ones up to the highest climbs. I saw a London where neighbours shared favours and returned them without pressure or obligation. I saw a London where hearts were unbroken, partnerships were lasting, peaceful and happy. I saw a London where families eat and play together. I saw a London where tears were wiped away. Now that is a big vision, and it's worth living for. And the challenge I'd like to set for you, not in each country, but in each community we work in, is to rewrite Revelation 21 for that community. For your community, for your hub, for your community, for your project. If we are about punching holes in the darkness, if our telos is to bring in the kingdom of God, how can we tell how we're getting on? And what would it look like to write that down? Let me pray for you and hand you over to Graham. Father, I thank you for everyone here. I thank you for this wonderful team of people so committed to serving you and serving others. I pray for them. that you will be with them, that you will give them your spirit of grace, kindness and love and self-control. And I pray that you will give each one your wisdom, that together we might be this movement for change, not a series of NGOs, someone else's story, but a movement of people committed to bringing the kingdom of God in our localities. Amen.
Thank you, Steve, very much. No, I wasn't panicking. I'm just anxious that we should now have a time of quiet when we can reflect upon these really profound things that we've been thinking about, not just this morning, but also over the last